such releases when related to the aforementioned topics, however. You can learn more about the RPG Talk Show, hosts, guests, and archives of previous episodes on our website at rpgtalkshow.com. You can follow us on Twitter at RPG Talk Show. You can catch our show live on twitch.tv/RPG Research, or the RPG Talk Show discusses weekly news, information, commentary. The RPG Talk Show discusses weekly news, information, commentary, discussion, and debate about the effects of all role-playing game formats and their potential uses for professional, educational, recreational, and therapeutic goals. The RPG Talk Show is not about the latest modules and releases. There are plenty of sources for that information. We will mention such releases when related to the aforementioned topics, however. You can learn more about the RPG Talk Show, hosts, guests, and archives of previous episodes on our website at rpgtalkshow.com. You can follow us on Twitter at RPG Talk Show. You can catch our show live on twitch.tv/RPG Research or on youtube.com/RPG Research, Thursdays, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Time, and chat with us during the live broadcast. RPG Research Patreon supporters can access the recorded episodes a month or more before they are available to the general public as a thank you for your support. You can become a Patreon supporter by swinging by patreon.com/RPG Research. Those videos will then later be available on youtube.com/RPG Research. Role-playing game formats we discuss include the original tabletop RPG, usually referred to just as RPG or TRPG. Please, either no T's or just one T. There's no need for a second T, as in TTRPG. That's just wasteful of air and paper and typing and time. So please, just RPG or TRPG for tabletop role-playing games. Live-action role-playing games, LRPG, including LARPs. Electronic role-playing games, aka ERPG, which includes solo games and massive multiplayer online games, everything in between, VR, AR, PR, etc. And then hybrid role-playing games, HRPGs, which also include solo adventure books and modules. This episode is sponsored by the wonderful, wonderful Patreon supporters for the nonprofit RPG Research. We are also sponsored by RPG Therapeutics LLC and Dots RPG through their kind donations to RPG Research. You can learn more about RPG Research, the nonprofit 501c3 research and human services organization, studying the effects of all role-playing game formats and their potential to help improve lives, at www.rpgresearch.com. A quick little quote from them: "We are helping people heal and improving the quality of life for diverse populations around the world by providing accessible and inclusive collaborative research-supported programs using music and role-playing games. Researching RPGs since 1983, providing programs in schools since 1985, in therapeutic settings and online since 2004. A 501c3 nonprofit provides an open international community, sharing, studying, and providing accessible and inclusive collaborative music and games to help improve people's lives." You can learn more about RPG Therapeutics LLC, the for-profit professional services company, at rpgtherapeutics.com. 20% of their profits are donated to RPG Research, and the book publications, the profits are donated to RPG Research. And also the nonprofit Dots RPG at dotsrpg.com. They are kindly out there helping advocate for accessibility. They are creating Braille dice and sharing those freely, Braille textbooks, and much more. Check them out again at dotsrpg.com. Our show varies each week, but typically includes the latest general RPG news related to our focus on role-playing games and research, community response and discussion, role-playing game-related theory and application discussions, updates on communities and professionals using role-playing games throughout the world, and often special guests, the latest updates on RPG Research, the RPG Bus, the RPG Trailer, the RPG Tour, RPG Education, and many, many, many other programs that we're involved with in various degrees. And while our primary show hosts are typically Hawk Robinson and John Welker, Hosts, co-hosts, and guests may vary from week to week. The RPG Talk Show will begin in a few minutes. This message may repeat. The RPG Talk Show discusses weekly news, information, commentary, discussion, and debate about the effects of all role-playing game formats and their potential uses for professional, educational, recreational, and therapeutic goals. The RPG Talk Show is not about the latest modules and releases. There are plenty of sources for that information. We will mention such releases when related to the aforementioned topics, however. You can learn more about the RPG Talk Show, hosts, guests, and archives of previous episodes on our website at rpgtalkshow.com. You can follow us on Twitter at RPG Talk Show. Hello and welcome to the RPG Talk Show. I am your host, Hawk Robinson, with
John Welker.
And this is our weekly show, but at a new day. Still the same bat time, but a different bat
channel.
Nope, same bat channel.
Same bat channel?
Place, just a different bat day.
How batty.
So we have been on Thursdays from 4 to 5 for a few months. We recently consolidated a lot of the RPG research schedules, and so now it's Mondays, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific time. So please make a note of it. Update your bookmarks, your calendar, your podcasts, etc. RPGresearch.com is the website. I probably need to update the website. I probably haven't done that because I'm getting over this illness.
I updated RPG Talk Show if it helps.
You what?
RPGtalkshow.com.
You did?
Mm-hmm.
You logged in and fixed it?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, John. I didn't know that. I didn't know you had an account set up to do that. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for making my life a little bit easier every time. Appreciate it. Cool. And, of course, we're on Twitter at RPG Talk Show and youtube.com/RPG Research when we're streaming live, which is right now. This is April 22nd, 2019 at 4:07 p.m. Pacific time. So 4 to 5 p.m., and you heard the blurb in the recording about all the topics we covered, so we don't have to go through all of that again. So we can just jump right in and start talking about today's news. John, what do you have?
All right. So this is, I do believe, unless something miraculously different happens, this is probably the last thing I'm going to say about the Critical Role, The Legend of Vox Machina animated special that became a full-on 10-episode series. 88,887 backers pledged $11,385,449 to bring this project to life.
Wow.
Congratulations, Critical Role.
Wow. That's amazing.
Now, the other Kickstarter that I've been following closely, and I will be talking more about until it ends, which is not that long from now. So if you haven't supported Critical Core, not Critical Role, Critical Core, jump in on Game to Grow's tabletop game that helps kids on the autism spectrum build confidence and social skills one dragon at a time. They have so far raised $204,263 of their $48,000 goal and are now in their backers 2,589. The reason I want to make sure you know how many backers there were, the 2,589, is because of one of their stretch goals, which is at 2,600. The limited edition Blue Sandstone dice upgraded for benefactors of $250 or more. RPG Research is should be getting a set of dice for that. The last couple stretch goals, 190,000 intro for therapist and video series, and 200,000 the Game Master screen and board. The last two are going to be the World of Critical Core map at 210,000, and at 220,000 ability and item cards to help people remember special abilities and powers that they have. This is going to be done soon, folks, so jump in before the next 3 days are over. Now, a game that's coming out that is virtual reality. It is called Firmament. It is from Cyan Studios, the studios that brought you Myst. And this will be a virtual reality version of that game. It's not the same game. It's not the same storyline. but it's the same style and in VR. We work with VR, and I'm going to be getting a copy of this, but only the digital copies because I can't afford more than the $30. The $120 version gets you the actual box with the discs and things like that. Everything below that is all digital. Mm-hmm. But this is going to be pretty darn exciting, and I'm looking forward to borrowing your VR equipment.
Yeah. Well, so we have AR, VR with the Jedi Challengers.
Right.
And then we have the Lenovo. Oh, it's in the house. But it's based on the Dream technology, so you can do a full 360. It's high quality. It's better quality than the Oculus Go.
Right.
It's meant to compete with the Go. It costs about 4 times as much as the Go, but it's a lot better. But both the Go and this Lenovo version, you stay in place, but you have a full 360-degree look around. So you sit in a rotating chair or something,
right?
Or stand, but you don't move around. You can fake move, but you moving around the environment doesn't move you in the environment. Unlike the HTC Vive, we have the older generation, which is a little bit lower res. It's only 720 instead of 1080, instead of the Pro and such. And because I got it used, the cabling's got some problems where it's cutting out, and I may have to try to solder it or something and try to fix it. I was trying to do it on a budget for $400 instead of $1,400.
Anybody wants to donate a new set to us?
We could sure use it, yeah. But
hey, Cyan, send us a set so we can show your product.
We do what we can, and I would like to get the newer version someday, but it's close to $2,000 for the set.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Maybe after RPG record. Boy, I just can't speak.
Words all mixed up, walking backwards.
RPG research becomes self-sufficient. They can get their own.
That would be nice.
All right, so all of these Kickstarters are showing a real upswing in the popularity of role-playing games, especially tabletop role-playing games. And a couple articles, one from N-World and one from ICV2, are both talking about the latest report on the numbers for
in the market.
For the market of role-playing games.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, the total hobby games category is down by 3%.
2018 or first quarter 2019?
This is up to 2018.
Yeah, so it's 2018. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So total hobby games is down 3%, and collectible games are down 14%. Everybody
what would
else
be collectible games. What does that mean?
Well, collectible games, which include trading/collectible card games, collectible miniature games, and collectible dice games.
Ah, okay. So that's what they mean.
Right.
All right.
Miniatures, non-collectible board games, card games, dice games, and role-playing games is the next category, non-collectible miniature games. There's hobby board games, House on the Hill, and things like that. Hobby card and dice games. Now, these are non-collectible card games, which they do exist.
Mm-hmm.
And role-playing games.
Okay.
Now, get right there. The hobby card and dice games, the non-collectible version, is flat. From between 2017 and 2018, zero growth, 150 million.
And that's the first time in about 10, 11 years it's been flat, right?
Right. It's been going up.
Well, that's something to watch for, though. That is a significant change.
Now, 2013, they were at 45 million.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're at 150.
Right. I mean, huge growth.
Yeah. So the growth over time is bigger, but just in the last year, we're talking flat.
Yeah.
Collectible card games, or just collectible games in total, are down 14%.
Okay.
This brought the entire category down 13%. Role-playing games are up 18%.
Okay, but that's notably about 10 to 20% slower growth than all the previous years. So that's interesting. There's been a little bit of slowdown.
Well, and
it's still good that it's growth, but it is something to watch for.
Again, the change since 2013 to current is we're talking 15 million to 65 million.
Yeah. It's been wonderful decade for growth. But so all things, what goes up sometimes has to come down a little bit.
I believe that is a requirement of the market.
So, all right. Well, let's not get bogged down too much into it, but it's certainly something to be aware of because we've been talking about how, in the last couple of years, of course, video games have been back on the growth because they were down for about 6 years there, 8 years. They had been going downhill and then flattened out around 2016 and then have been slowly, getting back up there. And it might be that that's taking some of the income, some of the disposable income and such from the other hobby areas as people have more to spend. Because remember, that was one of the theories about why the hobby industry boomed so much and why the video game market dropped so quickly, so precipitously after the 2008 crash, was people became a little more careful about where they put their money.
Right.
And where they could get the most bang for the buck and keep using it. And that was one of the theories of board games. That and also about the social unplugging and such. But I've been theorizing it was mostly money. And we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of variables, of course.
One of the interesting things, though, about board games now is I don't remember before a decade or more ago where $100 games were the standard.
There's the premium game market now as a whole thing that really wasn't a thing. I mean, you saw hints of it way back with 3rd edition where you got the leather-bound DM Player's Handbook and such. It was just a little bit of a trial that they did. And then you've been seeing kind of an increase in premium options for the more dedicated hardcore ones.
Oh, yeah.
Bragging rights.
$500 game sets to play a D&D out of. The market of people with disposable income is there. Now on to our next topic. I don't have a nice segue into this, but PellegrinePress.com is talking about one of their own D&D games called Swords of Serpentine, and calling it D&D is not accurate because it's a role-playing game, but it is not Dungeons & Dragons. Mm-hmm. And they had an article about social combat and the old-fashioned idea of morale. Mm-hmm. And you also have a stat called sway, and you use your sway to attack morale to either persuade somebody or make them run away. The social attack on somebody's morale. Just like warfare and the general ability you'd use to physically attack somebody's health, a hero with a high sway is incredibly good at manipulating the people around them.
Okay. So, like the old use of charisma and such.
Yep.
Yeah. And, of course, even back in 1st edition D&D, AD&D, you had the entire morale rules for NPCs and everything that you could also apply to PCs if you wanted under, like, magical circumstances and certain circumstances, which had detailed outcomes. It wasn't just run away in fear. Whether they were liked or disliked in the initial impression, you had all these morale modifiers and percentages, and your charisma affected that, and then whether or not the alignments matched or the species matched, or all those different things were variables that were included in the morale modifier.
Did it have fight, flight, or fear, or is it?
Yeah, it had fight or flight,
freeze,
intimidated. Yeah, it had all those different. It's in the DMG. You can go through the DMG. There's a whole section on morale and morale modifiers. And it could affect whether your henchman followed you into battle or turned around and ran tail. It could affect
turned and helped him.
If you ran into some highwaymen on the road and whether they, you were hostile or went, hey, it's my old, how you doing? It's fellow highwaymen, fellow gentlemen of the highway, people of the road.
I haven't seen you since the last burglar's ball.
Yes, exactly. So it really, it had it was a couple of pages of morale modifiers that, again, were geared for NPCs, but could easily be used in a PC situation, no problem.
And that also would get into the conversation when you're using it for the PCs of player agency.
Yes. Well, so the way it was useful with the PCs, it's if the players were willing to play along with that, right? To go, you kind of have a feeling about that. Your character has a feeling about this guy, right? This is outside of the player's thing. It's just how your character feels on initial, and you've got all these variables in here that says you have a negative or positive in this way feeling towards this NPC when you encounter him. And the player can still decide what to do with that. But that is the PC's initial reaction to that NPC that the DM has kind of laid out. The other one it was useful for is different types of spells, whether people were trying to charm or what have you. and being able to have a more nuanced, rather than, yes, master, I'll do whatever you say, except kill myself.
Well,
have a more nuanced response.
That's how the players abuse the spell. That's not how it's written.
Right. Well, but it helps the DM and the player have a little bit more nuanced way to handle that. So those rules have been around for decades. So I was joking when you said, "Oh, what once was old is new again." Boy, that never happens.
Cthulhu has a bit of that.
Yes, it does. Of course,
when
it
you
does.
lose control of your character for a little while.
Yeah.
Adventures in Middle-earth.
Adventures in Middle-earth. Tor and Adventures in Middle-earth. Yeah, we're really with shadow points and such. Yeah, it's definitely not a new thing. But it's good to see. I mean, it's why, though, I argue every role-playing game system should separate charisma and comeliness. I got a whole video about that. We won't go into it in this one. You can go. I don't know if it's public yet. I think it's still on Patreon. But it was in response to another guy's video about charisma. And so I was responding. And then my response was, A, stats should be able to be separate from the player's abilities so that your character can do more than what the player can do, or be less than. And B, that charisma and comeliness should be two completely different stats. Because that's much... I mean, we're not trying to do a full-blown reality simulator, but there is a big difference between charisma and comeliness.
All right.
And one affects the other a little bit, but one is more transitory than the other.
Some of the ugliest people in the world were very
incredibly charismatic
and controlling entire countries.
Yeah, and some lovely people were totally, appearing people were totally not charismatic at all once they opened their mouths.
Yeah, Joe, what you talking about? I know the deal you are.
Well, just they say horrific things, and they're just not persuasive. As long as they don't open their mouths, they're like, oh, that's a very good-looking person. And boy, I don't know how to do this one without getting in trouble, but it was when I was a photographer, and we shot Ladies' Night, Thursday nights at the Studebaker's Club in Salt Lake. And this was when I was apprenticing and such as a photographer. And so there would be drawings for the women to win a free makeover and photo shoot there in the club right there.
Right.
That would happen. This is long before digital photography, by the way, so we get their name and number so that they could be sold later on portfolios and what have you, all that. But anyway, so at one point, a woman came up to me. Boy, I'm afraid I'm going to get in trouble on so many fronts for this.
Well, you have permission to table this.
I know, but it is such an excellent example.
Okay.
But I'm so worried because it's in this day and age of political correctness. But this is what happened. I'm not trying to pass judgment.
Okay.
But this is what happened.
Right. So this is what happened.
So a young, very attractive Vietnamese woman came up to me.
Okay.
And was just absolutely, as a professional photographer and everything, like, wow, incredibly photogenic, would definitely take some great shots and everything. Then she spoke with a horribly shrill, and it was, and I've spoken to many people from Vietnam and such. This was not because it was Vietnamese, right? It was not because of her Vietnamese accent. It was her horrifically shrill voice. But worse yet, she said, I take my clothes off, you'll take pictures?
Right.
And I was like, no, that's not what we do here. And then she uttered a bunch of swear words and such and was just really rude.
She was incredibly disappointed you didn't want to do nudes.
Yeah, but she was so rude. And her voice was just, please quit talking.
Ann Dresser.
And what's that?
Ann Dresser.
Ann Dresser? I don't know.
Actress, 90s, played a housekeeper, caregiver type of thing. But she had this voice.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I don't know what you mean. That one? Is that yeah.
She's got...
But it wasn't just the voice by itself, though, that added to it. It was also that she just said horrible things. She was the antithesis of charismatic.
Yeah.
She was rude. She was crass. She was demanding. She was not persuasive in any way, shape, or form. And I ended up handing her off to the lead photographer and stuff because I was just like, please, I do not want to deal with this person. This person is not nice. Yeah. So that it's a great example of the different. For me, that's why I like to use that example because it's such a clear distinction between comeliness and charisma.
Correct.
And I've never experienced a more extreme example so closely.
My example is maybe even more dangerous.
Yeah.
Hitler.
Okay. The other way. That's the other direction.
Well,
he wasn't exactly an attractive.
Yeah, he was incredibly ugly, but in my opinion,
he is now.
Yeah.
Very few, but he was nondescript. That was the thing.
Yeah, he was not attractive, but he had a charisma that he controlled an entire nation and multiple nations actually.
Yeah. And his artistic background helped him with putting together a whole marketing strategy, and he followed what's his name's the guy who created. That's why it went
Goebel?
from propaganda. No, the guy who created the entire term for propaganda.
Goebel.
Was it?
I think it was Goebel.
Goebel, yeah. No, not Goebel. No, not Goebel.
Goebel?
No, American. Cigarettes for Freedom. Torches of Freedom. This is the guy who created the entire concept of propaganda and everything. It's Torches of Freedom. He made cigarettes be cool for women. Edward Bernays, that's who it is.
Okay.
91 to 95. Apple, Steve Jobs and others used him. Anyway, he was famous. First it came out as propaganda was the term he used. But then Hitler and Stalin and the others used his techniques and called it propaganda.
Right.
So then he had to change the branding of the term that he used to be marketing and public relations. He changed the terminology after propaganda got such a bad word. Became such a bad word. But it's still the same guy and the same thing.
I actually saw a video yesterday about somebody trying to reclaim the definition of what propaganda is. Mm-hmm. Anything that's being used to influence your opinion and your motivations is propaganda.
Yeah, right. And it was Edward Bernays who created, who was the genius behind all that, as far as people call him that and everything. And it's highly effective, and there's a real psychological effect to it.
And then that brings you to, it's communication and those things.
And psychological manipulation and just knowing what people will respond to. He was able to change the American diet from coffee and toast to eggs and ham.
Right.
And juice and milk and all these other things. He was a key factor in that entire change of the American diet from coffee and toast.
What we think is the classic country breakfast, which was not.
Yeah.
It was you got up, you started working, and then after 4 hours of work, then you would eat something.
Right. Yep. So anyway, that's interesting. Yeah. So I think every role-playing game system should have a separate listing in one way or another, whether it's a skill, an attribute, whatever, that differentiates between charisma and comeliness. Now, comeliness, short of surgery and magic and such, is kind of what you got. Was what you got. Makeup and things like that can help a little bit.
Right.
But it's not really a skill. There are little things you can do, but it's not really a skill. Charisma could be a skill. It is something you can.
You can definitely teach it.
Yeah, I mean, look at all of the Toastmasters and all these other organizations that teach you to be a better speaker and such. So whether or not charisma should be an attribute, okay. That's a good question. Maybe as long as the system has something that allows something like charisma, presence, public speaking, manipulation, diplomacy, all those things, then maybe that makes an effect. But there needs to be some innate attribute because some people are inherently more charismatic than others.
Right.
So that comes back to an attribute, which makes sense, which then can be built on from a skill. I think comeliness is the one that you just can't build on from a skill, really.
Well, so how it's handled in D&D 5th edition and other ones that have these skill lists. So persuasion is a skill.
Yes, it is.
It's modified by your attribute, the charisma.
Right.
So in Doctor Who...
But there's no separate listing for comeliness. Right? Again,
there isn't.
The way charisma is handled with these systems that do that, that's okay. But comeliness should be added as basically a non-skill modifying attribute. So in Rollmaster, it's the 11th stat.
It would modify your skills. It would modify your skills. I'm not talking your skills modifying your charisma.
We were talking about morale. It would impact your initial morale modifier at first.
Right.
Until they spoke, and then the charisma kicks in. And as long as the charisma isn't a major deficit, which... Unearthed Arcana First Edition tried to address that, right? Comeliness and charisma had a circular impact on each other on initial and ongoing impact. So Rollmaster has 10 attributes plus appearance. So you have 10 attributes. first 5 affect development points of your character over time as you level up, and the other 5 do not, but all 10 affect different types of skill groups. And Rollmaster is huge on skills. And all of them have your current and then your potential that you could reach for, which is another thing I love about Rollmaster that you don't see. I've got to run you guys through Rollmaster at some point so you guys can understand the amazing things. It has issues. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it has such great ideas that I wish were in more systems on a simpler scale. Because Rollmaster is on a simple scale. One of these points I got to run you guys through that. But appearance is an 11th attribute, which has no modifier to any skills. It just is. What you get for your appearance is what you get for your appearance. It's what you're born with, as we all are, short of makeup and things like that,
or injury,
surgery,
or
etc. Yeah. So I think every game system should have that they should separate that. I think it's harmful that we mix the two together because it perpetuates the concept that ugly people are more charismatic and that ugly people are less charismatic and that attractive people are more charismatic. And vice versa, and it just creates more and more negative stereotypes.
It's the same stereotypes that tall people are better leaders than short people.
Right, although there's a psychological reason that has an effect.
Well, of course.
Tall people are more likely to be followed. Just statistically, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
If you have a group of people and there's a taller person, they can have less presence and other things, and people will automatically defer to a tall person. Automatically. It's a hardwired, primal thing that... but there are others who get triggered the other way. There's little man syndrome or whatever.
Right.
I don't know if that really exists or not.
The chip on the block.
Yeah. It's a tall guy. Take him out. But there's a lot of research about leadership and height that it automatically gives you more of a leadership advantage.
There is, I think, part of that thing is an association with age. When you're a child, the person in charge is the tall one.
There's the peer thing, but there's also survival. It goes back to even more primitive than that as far as just survival. Usually, the bigger person is usually stronger, right? Just because they
longer
have
reach,
muscle to move things, so might be a better protector. Thus, the tribe, the group, is more likely to defer to the better protector for survival. That's evolutionary psychology, and evolutionary psychology has its challenges, but that's one of the many working theories that are out there. Anyway,
now let's talk about theories.
Yes,
we have a Dr. Catherine Crompton, research neuropsychologist, postdoc at PW Center, researching neurodiverse interaction, autism, peer support, and aging, and LGBTQ plus STEM. So I'm not sure what that was related to there.
So it sounds like it's a combination of considering the factors of aging, LGBTQ, and STEM knowledge, or STEM learning, or STEM. Is that what they're talking about? Science, technology, engineering, and math. They're learning. Yeah, go ahead and cover what you can.
I don't know why she includes LGBTQ in there, unless she's doing some kind of study on their representation in the field. Okay. But she's just published an article on infogram.com, Diversity in Social Intelligence. It's Diversity in Social Intelligence Participation Summary. And make a long story short, it breaks down to about 4 points. Autistic people share information with other autistic people as effectively as non-autistic people do. Information sharing can break down when pairs are from different neurotypes, when there's an autistic and a non-autistic person. Feeling of rapport between people of the same neurotype accompany these information sharing benefits. Autistic people have higher rapport with other autistic people, and non-autistic people have high rapport with non-autistic people. External observers can detect the lack of rapport apparent mixed autistic and non-autistic interactions. So this is the first time uncovered empirical evidence that there is a form of social intelligence specific to autistic people that's different than.
But is that really news? I mean, isn't that just a further in-group, out-group? For example, Down syndrome groups and such. I mean, I'm just curious. There have been other studies done on other groups. If this is just the first time,
Right, and I think
because in-group, out-group studies do this all the time and show the same thing. So, for example, in studies related to race, skin color and such, the ability for in-group to detect differences in, so they show a bunch of photos of, so let's say you're, white American, and they show you a bunch of photos of other white Americans and such. You're more likely to be able to tell the difference between same and different photos, like people who look similar. You'll have a more nuanced difference, be able to tell the difference between them, versus a white American then seeing a bunch of black Africans, right? And I don't mean African American. I mean from Africa, very dark skin complexion. White Americans are going to have a lot more trouble differentiating between photos of the same, of different and same people, of who's the same and which is different. It's harder to do that, and vice versa.
Okay,
you're going to have the exact same effect the other direction. This isn't
the numbers
unilateral.
Are
This is always, if you are from Africa and you are shown a bunch of white Americans, you're going to have the same effect.
Or either from either of the groups trying to differentiate the various different Asians.
Right. Exactly. So that is in-group, out-group biasing, right? It's again, one of these things that happens. So how is this, my question is this statistically any different than any other in-group, out-group study, right? Is there more to this autistic camaraderie, if you will, social connection, than any other in-group, out-group, or is it statistically about the same as any other in-group, out-group? Does the study bring that up in any way?
Let me take a quick look here, because it's got the numbers that I can't. Autistic to non-autistic mixed.
Yeah, always watch out when you're bringing these studies. I'm going to start questioning.
Well, that's why research. I sent it to you, so you can do the three things. I can't. It's not written that clearly as far as.
Well, because it's a media.
Well, it's a 2-page.
Attention, yeah. So it's gonna. Yeah.
It's a 2-page summary of the report. I don't have the full report on here.
Okay.
So what does all this mean?
Well, if you can send me a link at some point, I can delve in and we can talk about it next week. If you can send me a link to that.
Well, I already did.
Okay.
It's in the RPGS net.
Okay.
And they're talking about what they're further going to go on to do.
Okay. Which is
right in really tiny. Over the coming 6 months, we'll be sharing our data in journal articles and conferences.
Okay, so they haven't shared the data yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't even know.
This is brand new. So
okay. So we don't even know yet if it's any different than any other in-group, out-group statistics.
Right.
Okay, well,
the
that's
University
an important
of
thing
Edinburgh.
for people to keep in mind when they read the study. Is this really distinctive to autism spectrum, or is it just another example of in-group, out-group familiarity and comfort and such?
Right. And I thinking that they're going, based on the way they wrote this,
you think they're going to say it is?
Found autistic social behavior, including effective communication, effective social interaction. I'm thinking that it's more than you belong to my group, you belong to groups that they literally think alike or think similar enough that they're easier to understand.
That's in-group, out-group.
Right.
That's how that works.
In-group, out-group based on physical appearance versus in-group, out-group based on do we understand the same language?
That's just one of the many studies that show in-group, out-group affinity.
Right.
So as you are of the same group, so let's say you're all from Southern California. Everybody from Southern California that's grown up living in Southern California is going to have more affinity, more language, more social connections, all these other things with each other, with other people from Southern California, than people from, let's say, New York.
Right.
And everybody who grew up on the streets of Bronx, they're going to have a lot more affinity with fellow folks who grew up on the streets of the Bronx and such.
The cohort effect.
It is very much the cohort effect. Now, with autism spectrum, a better comparison than that, because that is more cohort. The other type of cohort would be like, well, is this any different than, let's say, Down syndrome? Right? Because Down syndrome is XY, it has an extra chromosome. And chromosome 21 is off. And there's a very similar developmental pattern between people with Down syndrome. And so I don't even know if in-group, out-group studies have been done between Down syndrome folks and not, but assuming they have been, comparing that level of affinity to the affinity found with autism spectrum, right? Same modes of thinking, same way, feeling more affinity towards each other or not, etc. Or pick any other neuroatypical population.
And what about mixed groups
Or
of
neurodistinctive groups?
two different neurodistinctive groups, the Down syndrome with the autism, their communications, and
right. Well, but I'm just
on the
saying,
same level.
It sounds like the media is trying to make it like there's something unique to autism spectrum social communication part, and maybe
at
there
least
is.
that's the authors.
Right. Well, whatever. This is the media.
Yeah.
Hype. This isn't the research yet.
Right.
It's based on research, but it's not yet. They haven't published that yet. But it sounds like that's what they're trying to push for, is that, no, autism has its own unique way of communicating. And the question is, does their study account for in-group, out-group, or is it just that, they had an affinity for each other? Well, okay, yeah, I get that, because you're going to have similar neural processing. Now, again, it's a whole spectrum.
Right.
And I would contest that non-verbal autism spectrum are probably going to have, and I don't know, it depends if the study covers it or not.
Right.
We work a lot with autism.
How far on the spectrum are each of these participants?
And how far is the affinity and such going to be there?
Right.
Because I've definitely seen folks on the spectrum who cannot stand each other. Right? It's like anybody else. We have people we like and don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with autism spectrum. That other autism spectrum annoy each other. Like the things they don't like of themselves, they can't stand in the other person. It can go the other way. So I'm very curious to see the study on that. Do they say when they'll be releasing or what journal that'll be coming
6 months.
6 months, okay. Look forward to seeing that.
Templeton World, the Patrick Wild Center, University of Edinburgh. We're holding a public lecture on Wednesday the 5th. No, Wednesday, 5 June at 4 p.m. the Kennedy Tower, if you want to fly in.
Yeah.
There is a link for feedbacks and questions. Well, not a link, but there's information how to do that.
Okay. And that was included in the link you sent me?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And we've been asked to make a video about the research by our funders.
Good. Well, look forward to learning more about that.
Right.
That could be interesting. I just always wary because the media hype, it helps increase funding. Everything. I mean, everybody has to do that to some degree.
Publisher peril.
But publisher perish.
Perish. That's what I meant.
The peril of publisher perish.
Yeah, that's it. That's the.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's very interesting. We'll see how that unfolds. Look forward to more info on that.
Now, I haven't sent you this one. ParsingScience.org, because I just kind of discovered it just before I got here. Mm-hmm. And it's about adolescents' use of technology. Is it really related to depression, suicide, and ADHD, or might it be no worse for kids than eating potatoes?
Mm-hmm. And this is a podcast.
This is a podcast. It's all verbal.
I need a chance to listen to it. It was on January 14th, Nature, Human Behavior.
Right. The discussion on Twitter has been about it.
Oh, there is an article linked to it, though, that's discussed.
Right.
Go ahead.
So, basically, they're saying that the studies that may have shown there's any correlation between depression, suicide, and ADHD are no more accurate than the ones that show that children who eat potatoes are going to have more problems with these issues, or wearing glasses. There's correlation, not cause.
Correlation versus causality. That's why RPG research exists. Yeah. The whole correlation versus causality. So if you're a layperson, let me break it down for you briefly. If you're, a gamer who's listening to the show for our gaming feedback, but not necessarily a researcher. Researchers, you'll have heard this a gazillion times.
Plus one.
Yeah. Correlation does not prove causality. A wonderful example, and I'll have to, I don't remember the dates, but over 100 years ago, or more, there was noticed in statistical analysis that there was an increase in births whenever there were more storks seen in this northern European town.
Right.
Every time there were a lot more storks, that spring there were a lot more pregnancies, and that fall a lot more births. And so the legend kind of developed about the storks. I don't know how many hundreds of years ago. This was 100 years ago. I forget the timeline on this.
That stork's private baby.
But that the storks somehow affected fertility, because they saw a correlation between more storks and then more kids. this is a problem because I don't really want to know how storks affected fertility if that was the case.
It's their dance.
But here's what they eventually figured out. When the winter was especially cold in this northern European town, the storks were more likely to nest in the chimneys or around the chimneys of the houses to stay warm.
Right.
Which meant you saw a lot more storks huddling around your house trying to stay warm during a particularly cold season.
And you were staying inside more often.
Because it was a particularly cold season, you were more likely to stay indoors, maybe a little bored or lacking of other activities. So maybe more likely to engage in the more amorous activities that might lead to a higher level of fertility rate for the spring. Right. That's a big difference between causality and correlation. The storks did not cause more pregnancies. They were a correlation, but there was another variable that was unknown, which was the cold and people staying indoors more and all these other variables.
Right. It could be used as a predictive factor. Like we know that
you could, the two variables were linked together. They had a good correlation, strong correlation. So on a scale, a 1.0 to a 0 to a negative 1.0. If it's 0 to positive 1.0, it's a positive correlation. If it's to negative 1.0, it's a negative correlation. And generally, the media goes crazy over correlations that are above 0.2 and 0.4, which is really low correlation.
Right.
That's only slightly better than random. Right? If you're in the 0.2 to negative 0.2, that's mostly random noise. Slightly above 0.2 is considered slightly statistically significant, depending upon the field of study you're in. And unfortunately, in the social and psychology sciences, they tend to be a little more loosey-goosey with using those numbers. I hate that. I generally only like data that's 0.8 or higher, or negative 0.8 or higher. Right. That's strong correlation. But that doesn't prove causality.
No.
You have to actually be able to control for the variables that cause it to then make sure you can change. So if we had somehow been able to decrease and increase the number of storks, and then we saw that changing the births, and there was no other variable that could be accounting for that. That we are only, we are changing the variable of the storks. Right. And we did a controlled lab experiment, whatever, and the only big variable was more storks or less storks. And what do you know, the next spring they had more babies when there were more storks and fewer babies when there weren't. Then we might be on to something. However, that's kind of problematic in the wild. And so this is where it can be very tricky. That's why it's very important to do these controlled studies to isolate things. So what they're pointing out here in this study, as I read through it, there was only a 0.4% of the variation in well-being difference between the technology and other correlations that they made. For example, eating potatoes or wearing glasses, right? And so what they're saying is that's not strong science. I haven't read the study. You just sent me this, so I haven't had a chance to delve into it. There have been smaller controlled causal studies that do indeed show that an excessive amount, more than 2 hours a day, of certain types of screen time, we're not talking smartphones here, we're talking about much more immersive types, have an impact neurologically. And that goes up and up and up the more you do it. So 16 hours a day has a huge impact. That there is a strong link to obesity, but that doesn't prove causality. That may be that there's other habits associated with. For example, they may already be sedentary. That's why they're doing so much screen time, right? This is, again, the problem between causality and correlation. But they are seeing both immediate, mid, and long-term effects on brain patterns, brain development, all the material there from limited controlled studies that they're twiddling the bits in a more controlled way.
Love to see a PET scan during gameplay.
Right, and they're doing that. They're doing fMRIs and PETs and different types like that. But they're limited, and again, on the longer term part, that's much more difficult. It's too expensive, etc. So there's stuff there, but whether or not long term, what it is like anything else. If you go to the extreme, there's going to probably be problems. And a lot of these things that people are pointing to are more family issues than smartphone issues.
Right.
Right? They may be using the smartphone to cope with a bad family issue. So you may be seeing behavioral issues in a kid who's on the smartphone all the time, but it's because their family issue is so bad. So again, this is where causality versus correlation. Correlation is broken.
There's a commercial where kid comes home from college and he's now living in the house, and he's got his phone always in his hand, and he's doing stuff like that. And the parents are noticing this, of course, and then at dinner table, the dad just grabs his phone and looks at it and goes, "Oh, you have job interviews." You've been doing something on this phone.
The kid hasn't been properly communicating with the family, which means
Right.
there's something wrong with the family dynamic that the father didn't know that.
Exactly. He's
Is it the
obviously not
cell phone? Is it the smartphone's fault? Well, there are societal changes that happen because of technology, because we use technology differently, and we have different social norms.
Right.
So a beautiful example is when Katie and I, my fiance and I, were at the Blue Man show in Spokane waiting in line, and they were having technical issues. So we were waiting in line. And she and I were speaking to each other and looking around and talking about what we saw and all of this. Most of the people in line, in couples, were on their smartphones, not speaking. Most of the line was quiet. It was a long line.
Right.
Most of the line, instead of the usual hubbub of everybody chatting and everything else, everybody was on their smartphones, tapping away, reading and tapping. Every now and then they might share something with the other one, show them or send them or something. And But
Right.
for the most part, it was silent except for the tapping of smartphones. Just dozens, scores of people, hundreds of people.
It's like a horror movie.
And so when Katie and I were like talking to each other in hushed voices, where normally like we go to the opera or the symphony or some other places where there might not be so many technology preferred people.
Right.
And you know me, I'm a technologist hardcore, right? I love
When you go to the opera, they tell you to put that phone away.
Yeah, waiting in line.
Yeah.
The lobby is a noise of conversation. It's a murmur of everybody chatting with each other. It was really striking. The silence. The silence was deafening.
I think I would have been scared.
Well, and then the show ended up grossing her out too much, and we left about 20 minutes after it finally did start. And they kept starting and stopping it. It had nothing but problems.
The Blue Man Group was disgusting.
They like shoved a whole bunch of stuff in the guy's mouth and like pulled it out in the shape of his throat and
okay.
And that Katie, that just grossed her out.
I have never seen that, and I don't blame her.
It was there was a lot of scatological aspects to it, and it just grossed her out.
This is not something I've seen.
And
Blue Man Group before.
they had to keep stopping it because of technical issues.
Right.
So we and a lot of other people got our money back and left. About 20 minutes after the show finally started, which was about, I think, almost an hour after it was supposed to have started. But anyway, it was very interesting to see this group of people, and they were different ages. They were from young to 50s, but they were mostly on their smartphones, barely talking to each other. It was striking. That is more the social norm. We've talked about before about personality types and predictors of deviant behavior from analysis of different factors. Right? We've talked about it before. And how back in the 70s, it was an accurate predictor if you had a tattoo of your level of likelihood of criminal behavior and having a criminal record and such was statistically predictable.
Well,
if you had a tattoo in the 70s.
Was it...
whatever the other variables you want to throw in, the military, all these other things.
I'm thinking chicken and egg scenario here.
Well, it didn't matter.
Right.
It was an accurate predictor that if you had a tattoo back in the 70s, odds are you were considered deviant personality type, that you had a high likelihood of criminality, etc. It was a sign of rebellion. And it was a small percentage of the population that had tattoos. When I was in this class with this professor, he says, so who here has tattoos and or other piercings besides your ears and such? And there were maybe 6 of us who did not raise our hands in the entire class of 50 or 60 people. And he said, all right, those of you who don't, raise your hands. All right, you guys now are the deviant. You don't have the tattoos and the extra piercings. You're considered statistically deviant.
That's true.
It also means that predictor from the 70s no longer works, right, for a personality type test.
Right.
Being on the question and saying, do you have a tattoo? It's no longer statistically useful for predicting a personality type, and the point of being predicting what people's behavior will be. Useless because it's become so mainstream. So same thing with this thing on the phones and such. That's become the norm rather than the extreme, even though it's being done to an extreme by some people.
Right.
So again, all of this is correlation causality issues. Is all of this screen stuff changing us culturally? Without a doubt. it's changing us culturally, how we interface with each other. By definition, it is.
I'm
Whether
seeing
that's better or worse, that's a value judgment. That's a whole other thing. But,
this is only anecdotal, so it has no statistical merit. But I have seen a change in people's levels of patience. How long?
again, that is your own personal. Again, that's not good science. Just
I specifically stated this was not science.
Yes.
This is completely anecdotal,
Yes.
and I'm using myself as the exact example,
which is terrible science.
Yeah. When
Isn't science.
I'm not claiming it's science.
Sure, I
I'm
understand.
claiming it's a story.
Yes, go ahead.
When I was on the internet in the 90s, and you would click on a website, walk away, make a cup of coffee, check to see if it's loaded yet. If it had pictures, you'd go make a sandwich.
Right. It was a video you waited till the next day.
And we were okay with that. We expected that.
Yeah.
Now it's like click, and if it's not instantly in your face,
Sure. Yeah.
you're like going, did I miss the button? Did I do something wrong? Is my computer down?
But that is conditioning for expectations of causality of
Right.
when you click the light switch on, you expect the light to come on quickly, not click it on and wait 5 seconds.
As it warms up.
Right. Like old vacuum tubes. You would
Yeah.
wait for like my old amps and stuff, which I still have, my music amps. You do wait for it to warm up. That's just a factor of the technology. That's not so much impatience as just conditioning to expected outcome.
Right.
So if you flip the light switch on and off, we've talked about this with conditioning before, and it randomly comes on and off for you sometimes, you're more likely to keep flipping that light switch. This is how addiction and conditioning works. Keep flipping it if it's random, as opposed to if it's every 10 times. You'll flip it 10 times, and then if it doesn't come on, maybe after the 20th time, you'll stop trying because you'll figure the bulb's burned out. But if it's random,
I hope it doesn't take me 20 times to figure
well,
out.
the first time through, you might be, I might have missed the count. Let me try one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, I need a new bulb or something. Or I need to check the fuse. But if it's random, you're going to keep flipping it and flipping it and flipping it for a while, hoping that it'll eventually come on. Especially if it's like random between anywhere from 1 to 1,000 times it'll come on.
Yeah.
You're going to be there.
No
a long
prediction
time
whatsoever.
trying. Yeah, and that's how gambling and everything and all that works. So, and we've talked about that before. Did you have any others on that?
Nope, that was all my articles right up to near the end.
Well, and we're close to wrapping up, but let me give you guys some updates. We have overhauled our schedule. So we're no longer doing the RPG Talk Show on Thursdays. It's now Mondays, 4 to 5 p.m., as we mentioned at the beginning. Also, we're no longer doing Thursday night broadcasts from 6 to 9 p.m. We have consolidated those with the... So we're no longer doing Thursday 6 to 9 or Saturdays 11 to 2. We've consolidated both of those to Sundays 12 to 3, 12 noon to 3 p.m. This is all Pacific time. And so we're no longer doing broadcasts on Thursdays at all. We're no longer doing broadcasts on Fridays at all. We consolidate all our broadcasts to Mondays, Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays.
Right.
So quick rundown of our new schedule. And hopefully I'll get this right off the top of my head. So Sundays from 10 a.m. to noon is the researchers meeting. That's when all our researchers meet, check in on their latest research, their blog postings, our projects, etc. And I do some lectures and training related to research.
I'm so glad that the research department has expanded beyond you.
Oh, me too. Me too. It's growing leaps and bounds, thankfully. I hope someday soon, once we have funding, sometime next year, I hope it actually will live up to the research institute that I hope it will become someday. That I really hope someday it will be an independent research institute that has a full body of, and again, is an open, unlike so many others, is open, and
right.
Sharing, and that's the dream I have someday. Whether or not it happens, we'll see. It seems so close to happening, but the big thing is funding. Just not there yet on the funding. We're there on staffing growing and getting everything in place, and so if the funding
Patreon.com/RPG Research.
So if we get to the funding thing, boom, we could make great things happen. We just got to, but we're getting everything in place. Yeah. We're getting everything ready for that to happen.
So researchers are on Tuesdays.
So Sundays, first Sundays from 10 a.m. to noon, Sundays Pacific time. Then from noon to 3 is either RPG theory, applied gaming, or GM workshops. Kind of alternating weeks, right? 1 week it'll be theory / lecture. The other week it'll be applied gaming / GM workshops, right? And that'll be from noon to 3 on Sundays. Then there's a couple-hour break, as Dan requested, and then 5 p.m. we start setting up for Heroes of the Mist. 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. is Heroes of the Mist, actual play tabletop role-playing game, audience interactive, and then that's Sunday. That's a wrap. Now, the Heroes of the Mist show is going to be wrapping up season 1 pretty soon here. We're going to be finishing May 19th, I think, is our last broadcast.
I think that's when we agreed on.
Season 1, yep, because after that, everybody's going to, between holidays and my wedding coming and all of that, it's just going to be too difficult until about August. And then hopefully we'll pick up season 2 either in August or September if people want to continue. I think so, but you never know. After summer break, you just have to see who comes back. But that's about to wrap up.
I could have run the show without you. I just put everybody through Tomb of Horrors.
Well, we could keep doing a show,
right?
Not Heroes of the Mist. We could turn it into a different applied session for those who can't do earlier in the day, and do straight out of the modules, do Beck Me, do whatever. Just do the Rollmaster I want to do, whatever. We could totally turn into something else while we wait. We'll see. But as far as Heroes of the Mist, that will be ending May 19th for season 1. And it'll be like 50. No, I think we're going to make 46 episodes or 48 episodes when it finishes for season 1. So that's not bad. We started June 24th, and we've had to skip here and there. But that's pretty good. Then Mondays from 4 to 5 p.m. is RPG Talk Show right here, right now.
Note about that.
Yes.
I have 21 guests or 21 people who have indicated that they are willing to be guests.
And last week we had a twofer.
We had twofer because scheduling. I cheated.
we had Jess from the Dots RPG project, which Braille dice and other accessibility and such. It was awesome, from New York. And then on the other end of the coast in Oakland, California, we had Becky from the Roleplay Workshop.
Right.
And she's a teacher who quit her career as a teacher because she found role-playing game was a more effective mode of teaching, and has been doing that for a living ever since. We had both of them on the show last week, which was awesome to have both of them. And they finally started interacting with each other, and I was just like, yeah, excellent. Because we had kind of improvised that one. Because somebody doubled them up.
We won't mention my name.
But it worked out. I think it worked out. I think it's a pretty good episode. And this is, just a reminder, this episode is 115. RPG Talk Show 115.
So, since you're just now finding us, you need to start from the beginning. You missed an important one, I promise you.
I still need to get most of those on our website. What I've done is I've made it a link to the playlist for the most part, but it's hit or miss.
Well, I want to tell our next guest.
Yeah, who's the guest for next week then?
Next week is Grant Sparks.
Grant Sparks. Tell me about Grant Sparks. Tell everybody about Grant Sparks.
Grant Sparks has been playing role-playing games for 15 years. He's been a GM for 11. He's been researching for 3 years. Mm-hmm. And he's getting role-playing game-related research in undergrad, carried by his hypothesis with his current program as a MS in Clinical and Counseling Psychology. That's Masters of Science. He's currently investigating the social stigma associated with the geek culture and the psychological benefits of playing tabletop role-playing games.
Okay, very cool.
So we'll be talking about that. And we're going to mix it up. There's going to be the varying degrees of celebrity, from completely obscure to almost minor, just a little bit more. One more person knows them, then they'd be a celebrity maybe.
That 7 degrees of
separation
from what's
Kevin Bacon.
Bacon, yeah, something like that.
I know people that knew Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, and the rest will start announcing and getting locked into a schedule so we can let people know well in advance. Now, again, these shows are broadcast live to everybody, but then if you miss the live show, the recordings go straight to our Patreon supporters, RPG Research Patreon supporters, as a thank you for their support, for their monthly donations. And then a month or so later, sometimes a lot later, but we get to it when we can. Although now with our new tiers, it's more automatic.
Okay.
Because I set it to that tier, and then it automatically, about 4 or 5 weeks after, goes live. It doesn't do the de-escalating tiers anymore.
Okay.
You get different content at the different tiers, and you either get it early or it's public.
Right.
That makes it more manageable for us. So I'm able to just put it in there, fire and forget, and I don't have to manually go in every week and bump everything in. Because we're just cranking out so much content, I just couldn't keep up with it. So we're making that easier. But if you miss the live shows, then for about a month or so after, you will want the Patreon subscription to be able to do it. Otherwise, they'll eventually be available on our YouTube playlist. Although again, I still have to flip the bits on those to make them public. Cool. Well, I look forward to your list. You had quite a few names on there. I'm looking forward to when you got them locked in, and we'll announce more of those.
Yep, I will be doing. Now that I know what order I want to do them, and we're going to just start.
Which will be partly dictated by who says when they can do it.
Well, yeah, I have one of the more closer edge to celebrity levels. She says that she's booked till June.
Okay.
So
that's fine.
She's going to be further down the list, but we'll get her.
Get it locked in as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So that's RPG Talk Show now Mondays from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Right here on youtube.com/RPG Research, rpgtalkshow.com. And so that's the RPG Talk Show. Now from 6 to 9 p.m. From 6 to 7 p.m. on Mondays is our weekly administrative meeting where we just do the administrative stuff for RPG Research. What's coming up for the week, all the planning, who's working on what. Next week, we're doing our board meeting from 6 to 10. That'll be all taken up for that. And we broadcast that live because we want as much transparency as possible as a 501c3 nonprofit. But normally, Monday, 6 to 7 p.m. is our administrative meeting. Sometimes it's less. Sometimes it goes over more, but I try to keep it down to the 30, 45-minute range when possible, which we did last week. Then after that, from 7 to 10 or 7 to 9, depending upon the week. If it is an RPG theory day, it's usually 7 to 9, just 2 hours, because it's a lecture and such, and you can only hold so much. If it's an applied gaming day, then it's 7 to 10, because we need that 3 hours to actually get through most games, unless it's a short game, but typically 7 to 10.
And is applied gaming today?
And there is applied gaming today, and you were planning to do Dungeon,
yes.
Assuming people show up for that.
Show up.
Because we've changed the schedule around, there's been a lot of confusion, and our attendance has got a little scrambled, so it might take a week or two for that or 3 or 4 to get that settled back in. And so that's our Mondays. And then Tuesday mornings from 9 a.m. to noon is our alternate researchers meeting, especially for those of our research staff that are in other time zones like Saudi Arabia and Brazil and such, and they have trouble making the Monday and Sunday times. That Tuesday works better for them. And then that's it for broadcast. Now, we still do our community programs on Fridays from 4 to 7 p.m., and we'll be opening up some Saturday programs before too long as well. And this Friday we have coming up with the Drop-In and RPG. We're going to be at Spark Central.
Right.
So our usual location there at Spark Central from 4 to 7 p.m. down there in the Kendall Yards area. We don't broadcast that. We might do a quick little Instagram or like, hey, come on down and join us thing, but we don't broadcast the games and such there because it's protected youth and all of that and adults and such. And then let's see, is this a 5th Friday month or not? It is not. So that's 26. So the following Friday, May the 3rd, we're going to be out at Manitou Park on the South Hill, Spokane, and we'll be doing both our drop-in and RPG with the bus and trailer there at the park. If the weather's nice, we will also be out in the park doing activities, and including resuming our wonderful drum facilitation circles. Woohoo! And those will run from 4:30 to 6:30, right? So we have gaming from 4 to 7, but then we've got a subset for the percussion to allow us time for the offset, that people can show up. And then I figured instead of trying to juggle the gaming and the drums at the same time, and drumming's a little shorter, that would be a safe way to offset it. So we have a new meetup called Spokane-Music for people to sign up for that. People are starting to sign up already. And I sent you an email asking you to make sure you join in there. But that will be this May 3rd at Manitou Park at the northeast corner there, just off of Grand. You look for the bus and the trailer. So if the weather's nice, we'll be set up right out on the grass there, right on the side of the park there. If the weather's not so nice, if nobody's using the gazebo, we'll use the gazebo. If somebody's using the gazebo and the weather's not nice, then we'll use the bus and the trailer, potentially, depending on what's going on with the role-playing. The role-playing takes precedent first, but assuming just the bus being used, we can use the trailer for drumming and make that work. For $1,000, we can get a canopy that goes over the back of when the tailgate's out as a deck.
Right.
It's about $1,000 for kind of fabric to extend that out and protect it from the rain. So one of these days, either through donation or others, we'll get that extension added to it so that we can have more people. Because then we can handle, I think, about 12 people drumming or more. So that'll be good for more inclement days or even really hot days too. It'll be nice.
I was thinking of a joke. Then the joke actually turned into a good idea.
Yeah.
The joke was, we could be rolling down the road with people drumming on in the back deck. But so that's a bad idea because it's illegal. But it's a good idea because it's illegal during a parade.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is legal during a parade. That's true. That would be cool if we get in some nonprofit parade.
Yeah.
I wonder if there is such a thing here.
Well, I don't think there's any for-profit parades.
Well, no, I mean a parade that is
focused on
just shows off the local nonprofits and such. Usually there's a more specific theme. I don't know if there is.
No, but I mean there's the 4th of July parade. Yeah. There's LGBT Pride Day parade. There's I Eat Lutefisk parade.
What?
Lutefisk?
I don't know what that is.
Oh, Sons of Norway. Lutefisk.
Oh, Sons of Norway. Okay.
Yeah. Lutefisk is pickled fish.
Herring.
Yeah.
Pickled herring. I grew up eating that because I'm half Finnish.
Right. So I call it the I Eat Lutefisk parade.
Okay. All right.
Sons of Norway.
Okay. So they don't call it that.
I'm assuming not. I'm Norwegian. I can say that.
Well, you're a mutt, though. So
I am a complete mutt. I can.
What's your list again? That you can
Spanish, Norwegian, French, German, Welsh, Cuban, Venezuelan, Irish, and English.
That's what 8.
I must have missed one.
You can pretty much cover. Yeah.
It should be 9. I must have missed one.
Inuit or Native American or anything.
Well, Venezuelan.
Oh, Venezuelan. There you go. Yeah. So Native American.
Did I not say Venezuelan? That's probably.
You might have. I missed it. Boy, they're a mess right now.
Yeah, I'm not going to claim that current Venezuela is something to be proud of. But
so, anyway,
I'm a native.
We are looking at extending the drop-ins to also be on Saturdays at some point here. We are talking to Spokane Parks and Rec and others about doing that on Saturdays as well. What that schedule will be, we don't know yet. It's going to depend on our availability of volunteers and demand, etc. But if you're in the Spokane area, come on down and enjoy the programs. And of course, if you're not yet a donor or supporter through Patreon or PayPal, please do swing by rpgresearch.com/donate and help us out with these programs, our research and our community programs, helping use music and role-playing games to improve lives globally. Wherever you may be well, happy gaming, and namaste.
Dream well.